Ultimately, for me, Unlimited Superman so far feels less like a bold direction and more like a mess for making headlines. Superman deserves better, and so do we.
Heads up, this podcast features strong language, adult themes, and the occasional colorful metaphor. Listener discretion is advised. As for the views, they're all ours. The smart ones, the spicy ones, and the occasional madness. Skylarkin Media Inc. and its affiliates reserve the right to deny all involvement.
It is Monday, the 23rd of June, and you are listening to the Four Outsiders Comics Podcast, brought to you by Skylarkin Media Inc. Hey everybody, we are back for episode 7 of the Four Outsiders Comics Podcast. We are down a man today. Michael is missing. I believe he is, as he said, he's captured and imprisoned in Latveria. But he'll be back next week, hopefully on parole. I am one of your 3 co-hosts tonight, Wade Wilberforce Saline. Yeah, that's my real name, Wilberforce. I'm here with...
I'm going to go with Mark Corporal Gibson tonight.
Oh, yes.
And I am Cosmic Herald Glenn tonight. You ain't getting my real name.
Rasta Surfer.
Yeah, Rasta Surfer.
Yeah, Rasta Surfer. All right, so we're gonna jump in with our picks this week. Books we loved about this kind of books that came out this week that we liked and we enjoyed. We want to talk about. Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, I did struggle for a book to talk about this week. There were a lot of good books. So there were like 3 different Batman books out. So you would think I would have something to say, but
Is that the bar for good for you? If it's a Batman book, really?
Oh well, he is a fascinating character, but I found the books were pretty middle of the road, and nothing jumped out at me. Nothing made me say, "Whoa, that was a good comic." So I picked the best of the best of the middle. I guess something new, something I hadn't read before, a new book. I didn't go with a DC or a Marvel choice, but Corporal, you wanna jump in first?
So to keep me from going off on this ranting tangent for like half an hour, I actually sat down and I wrote on my notes. So
Yay!
here we go. So my pick for this week is Superman Unlimited #2 by Dan Slott, Raphael Albuquerque. Am I saying that correctly?
I think that's it.
He's the illustrator on this. All right, so I'm gonna do something different this week. I'm not gonna give you a blow by blow of the issue. Instead, I'm just gonna talk about the points that jumped for me. Okay, so if you are a long-time listener of the show to this point, you would have heard us talking about absurdity in comics more than once. How it works when it's just book breaking. And Slott Superman Unlimited #2, it leans into the comic book absurdity, yes, but what I feel is a truly stupid degree. All right, consensus. All right, so we've already reviewed the first issue, which was Slott's DC debut. Now in issue 2, Dan Slott doubles down on what I would call the worst instincts of Marvel storytelling, and he applies them to Superman without really tapping into, at least in these first 2 issues, what makes Superman a fundamentally different character. Now, here's the most outrageous piece of world building in these 2 issues so far. Dan Slott has introduced the equivalent of a kryptonite Wakanda, an entire nation powered by green kryptonite. Infrastructure, green K. Currency, green K. Exports, green K. There's so much green kryptonite in circulation in the space of 2 issues that even common street criminals have kryptonite bullets, knives, brass knuckles, anything you can think of a criminal needs as a weapon, they've got it in kryptonite. No, Dan Slott doesn't even pretend that this much kryptonite is destabilizing to the world. He gives you this sense that he's playing it straight until he's playing it for laughs. So, I don't want this to be a kick Dan Slott session. There's one bright spot in this issue for me, which is the return of Knockout. So Knockout is like one of my favorite characters from like the original Superboy Connor Kent run back in the 90s, 2000s. She's a former female Fury of Apocalypse. If you don't know who Knockout is, she and Connor Kent were one-time item. So that should have been cool. She's been dead like in continuity for a bit now. I can't remember the exact issue when she died. Was it when it was something to do with hypertime and Superboy's adult version of himself? And it Black Zero? Yeah, anyway. So he brings back Knockout, which is great. She is just muscle for a crew of robbers. But instead of what I expected, where she gets to, throw down Superman, even if it's just for a moment, no. Dan Slott takes that away from me. He teases it and takes it away. So that is not really satisfying. Anyway, moving on. Let me get into why this issue really, really disgusts me. And I've got 5 reasons. I could have gone 10, but I kept it hopefully short. So number 1, this is a shock jock approach to writing. Entire issue, if you've been reading Spider-Man over in Marvel, this feels like Dan Slott is writing Spider-Man again. The entire issue feels like it is built for rage clicks and Twitter reactions.
I'm having flashbacks.
No, this might pass for storytelling over at Marvel, where Superman has been in this cycle of editorial abuse for years, but Superman deserves better. Superman is not a meme, he's not a punchline, he is the first superhero. This mythic character represents restraint and dignity and principled strength, and this issue mocks all of that outright. Number 2, it is a stupid evolution of an already stupid, unnecessary power. No, solar flare. This new power, this golden form that was teased in issue 1, but was further dived into in issue 2, it is an evolution of solar flare, which was a bad idea when Jeff Johns introduced it. If you don't know what solar flare is, Jeff Johns put together an idea where Superman can explode with solar energy, but he loses his powers and he has to recover them like a cheap LiPo battery or something. I thought it was gimmicky and pointless and it should have been discarded, faded away. But what does Dan Slott do? Nope. He resurrects it and decides to evolve it. Yay! No, Superman, after taking extreme kryptonite damage, goes into this golden form like a cheap knockoff Saiyan. Anyway, it feels really Dragon Ball Z. So this golden form heals him of the damage he would have taken. It makes him immune to kryptonite for exactly 200 seconds, and it gives him this shiny yellow aura. That yellow aura is very PC 1 million, by the way. But anyhow, no, if that isn't bad enough, you actually have Connor Kent, Superboy, the clone / protege uncle brother thing.
You forgot, Gibson, that after the 200 seconds, he no longer even has his regular superpowers. My apologies.
So in the issue, Superboy is actually making fun of the power. It feels like Superboy is a vehicle for Dan Slott to show that he ain't taking it seriously. Connor makes a joke about golden rings. I think that's a Sonic the Hedgehog reference. Box, which is a Mario reference with a golden star. Yeah. So even in the story, there are characters who are treating it as a joke, as a punchline. So if these characters can't take it seriously, why should we? Anyhow, moving on. Point number 3. Now, we've talked about absurdity on this show a lot, but as a part of comics, but the tone, I think, matters. No, I'm not anti-absurdity. Superman, particularly as a character, he's actually done a lot of weird, absurd stuff, like juggling planets. So things can get pretty wild. But here's the difference. The tone. When a writer introduces a new status quo or power or whatever, it has to matter to the character. There has to be consequence. When that shit is introduced and immediately made fun of by the characters themselves, it doesn't feel like smart or subversive. It feels lazy. And it feels lazy because the story isn't respecting its own stakes. Number 4, the new power is a net negative. So here's what the power does in a nutshell. Superman has yet another superpower. It removes the danger of kryptonite, which is his core iconic vulnerability. It adds a countdown gimmick to all of his fights now. And, like Wade pointed out, it makes him vulnerable immediately after using his power. So once that timer runs out, he is vulnerable. He doesn't have any powers. He is vulnerable, and he will still get taken out by kryptonite. So what's the point?
Oh yeah, he's still vulnerable to kryptonite too, right? When he turns back, no powers then. Yeah, oh yeah.
No powers and still vulnerable to kryptonite. So there's no real narrative gain here. with this thing. And what makes it even worse is that the golden form leaves Superman traceable by spectrometer. So this new energy signature is now detectable anywhere, even when he's Clark Kent, which makes it worse because if you have been reading Superman since DC All In, maybe a little before, anybody discovering that Superman is Clark Kent now dies. I don't know if Dan Slott realizes. So yeah, this is not great. So Superman has power, which solves nothing and it breaks everything and it makes it even more easy to exploit. My final point here is that number 5, this power breaks the in-universe logic and makes fun of it. Now, for decades, real-time decades, we've known that kryptonite is radioactive. It's not just the Kryptonians that is dangerous to, it's dangerous to humans as well. Lex Luthor actually got cancer from wearing a kryptonite ring, and I think he died, he died and had to get cloned or some nonsense. Some weirdness, like absurdity. But yeah, kryptonite is dangerous to humans. But in this 2 issues so far, there's an entire Emerald City nation where everything is powered by kryptonite. There's no mention of shielding. There doesn't seem any consequences. Actually, in this same issue, there's a bit where this other character, Jack Ryder, who's like a broadcaster, who is also the super character, the Creeper, is interviewing this woman, this farmer, who brings on her 2-headed goat, and she's claiming that the 2-headed goat has 2 heads because of the green kryptonite. So yeah, so Dancer is aware of the in-universe dangers of kryptonite and still plays it off as a joke. What makes it worse again is that in the same issue, and it feels like a lot has happened in this issue, the Creeper in this first encounter with Superman using his new golden form realizes just from observation that Superman is vulnerable immediately after using his power, after his timer runs out. So if the Creeper can figure it out just by observation, imagine, Superman's rogue gallery realizing the true impact of this power just from observation. Anyway, so this isn't a Superman story. This is very much a Marvel approach to Superman and the worst of Marvel's approach to storytelling. It feels like Slott is just twisting tropes rather than telling stories. And ultimately, for me, Unlimited Superman so far feels less like a bold direction and more like a mess for making headlines. Superman deserves better, and so do we. That's my take.
Yeah. What I got from this, my impression was like Slott might have, when he was 10 years old, had this idea. What if there was a whole city made of kryptonite? How would Superman deal with that? It feels very like a childish idea. And he decided to structure his entire Superman story, his entire Superman tale around this central idea of Kryptonite Island. I am curious as to why DC has allowed this, because this book doesn't line up at all with what's going on in the other Superman books. It feels very in its own universe. The whole, like I said, it feels like a 10-year-old came with these ideas. The whole golden Superman, 200 seconds of power, and then you'd be powered. It's like, this is not what I expected from you. As you would know, I am one of Dan Slott's biggest fans from a long time ago. Yeah. A little in history for y'all guys. Back when Dan Slott was doing Superior Spider-Man and he swapped out Peter Parker's brain for Dr. Octopus's, I wanted to hoist this man by his ankles and roast him over slow fire. I used to cuss Dan Slott every month after month after month after month. But when he resolved his story and he saw the way he did it, I said, all right, this isn't bad. This guy was going somewhere. This guy, I should let him cook. And he went on and he did Fantastic Four, and I like that too. As Mark said, this feels very Marvel-esque. Isn't doing what we've been seeing DC do with Superman over the last couple of years, which is taking a more uplifting type of Silver Age direction, more majestic, and making it feel grand and epic. He's kind of grown down Superman to a street level now with this stupid weakness. And I am still going to read it. It's Dan Slott and it's Superman. I want to see where it goes, how he's going to resolve it. This whole city thing can't last. The concept is mind-boggling, stupid. Coins made out of kryptonite, cars made out of kryptonite. And this stuff is, as we know, toxic to humans in long term. But nowadays, I guess with the advent of social media and fake news, people are trying to say, "Oh, that's not true," and everybody's debunking it, and people are saying is a conspiracy to keep them down and whatnot. So that bit is interesting, but we're gonna see where it goes. And I'm not impressed yet, but I'll give Slott a chance.
So no, I have not. But I'm listening to you guys talk, and my input is more from the ongoing conversation that we've had with just everything surrounding Dan Slott and his move over to DC. And I remember there was a bit of optimism that was being shared, but particularly on Wade's side. I'm not wishing bad or anything. It just felt like listening to you guys talk, I'm like, well, it's more or less, it was a 50-50 shot and it landed on tails, I guess. So it's a bit sad, I guess. Sorry for you guys to have to endure this. My experiences with Dan Slott went only as far as Superior. I read that series, I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it more for the concept and the character than Dan Slott himself. I don't know if like his writing in Superior Spider-Man is consistent throughout all his runs. If this is his particular style of writing, I don't know. So you guys gonna have to tell me. But I enjoyed it, and I've been a fan ever since. But I've heard you guys moaning about him as well, and yeah, I wasn't too optimistic about that. But hopefully it turns around, I guess.
Both Slott and Bendis, after they left Marvel and read Spider-Man, they came and I guess they brought their bad habits over to DC. That's the impression I get. This is not good. It's not good. That's all I gotta say anymore.
The thing for me, I credit Dan Slott with getting me back on board Spider-Man. I actually stopped reading Spider-Man after Clone Saga and didn't jump back on until Big Time. So, that is where a lot of my appreciation for Dan Slott comes from. But like you said, it feels like so here's a perspective. DC and Marvel are on two different power levels, two different power scales. That's just fact, right? So that's where you have a street level character like Batman. If Batman was to go over to Marvel, he would wreck shit. Let me be fair. And this is not me being a Batman fan. Batman is unpowered, but is still somehow able to keep up with Captain America, a literal super soldier. And the only really constant explanation is the different power levels or power scaling between two universes, right? But Marvel typically tends to take a very street level approach to their storytelling. That's why you may have somebody like Glenn, who is a big fan of the cosmic side of Marvel, cussing sometimes because that kind of approach bleeds over to the cosmic side. You can let me know if I'm on base here, Glenn. But DC on the other side of the street tends to take a more mythical approach to even street level characters like Green Arrow and Batman and Black Canary, where these characters like Batman and Green Arrow specifically, they don't have any powers, but they're able to stand up on the level with characters who would be considered demigods at least, right? To hold their own. I don't know why. I don't know why writers. It's not just Slop or Bendis, but writers. I've seen the comics online where people say that Superman is hard to write because he's overpowered, and I'm like, no, you just are not a great writer.
All right, so Glenn, you want to tell us what you read today, what you read this week, so we can get Gibson all bothered again?
All right, let me put on my glasses.
My office can I get ready?
Yeah, so much like Wade, I decided to go with a book written by an author that I'm a huge fan of, and that is Jonathan Hickman. He's been writing for the past couple of months the Avengers versus Aliens series, which turned out to be a four-part miniseries. I have a bit of an issue with that, but just to get into it, really. So the point of this story here, the premise of the story is that the aliens have invaded the Marvel universe and they've overrun pretty much everything. And our heroes had to form an exit strategy. It was a bit of an elaborate thing, which was executed with sacrifice and losses on our end. And it was basically abandoning Earth, trying to find another planet. That was a collaborative effort between a now very old Tony Stark, Hulk, what's her name? Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, and the likes. And for the most part, they pulled it off, but things didn't go as planned. That being said, they crash landed due to the events of leaving Earth, the weaknesses that befell the starship. They had to make a pit stop, so to speak, on Mars, only to find out that things are just as dire on Mars as they are on Earth. And Hickman is using his Krakoan continuity. Well, let's just say he has an ongoing continuity, his own personal continuity within the Marvel framework. So you would see a lot of, if you read a lot of Marvel Hickman, you will see a lot of callbacks and references to previous thing. And when the story is taking place, it's a callback to Krakoa, more like Araco, when they've terraformed Mars. But and this story is taking place like many, many years in the future, right? So they get there, and where they're expecting at least some form of civilization with the mutants and them on there, they came to meet like everything's pretty much wasted. So the book that came out this week was the last book, and where our heroes, they find out that everything is sinister as usual. Mr. Sinister has taken over the place, and he's been running experiments with the aliens that are there. Mr. Sinister, who his whole body um, has been jacked up, I should say, or he's introduced pretty much his entire library of mutant DNA, because he keeps a library of mutant DNA. It's been injected into his body. And so he's now offering that body to the aliens, and so they could do their thing, right? And that's pretty much the setup for this book. Our heroes are forced to make an unexpected last stand against the aliens with an evolved queen that is also a sinister, that is also possessing pretty much every mutant power known to man. And our team has to fight that. In the midst of all of this, we also have the situation that's going on with the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, because from the onset, they've played a part in the story. We have, I think, is T'Challa, an old version of T'Challa, and his son with Storm. I can't recall his name right now, but he wields lightning. The child, he wields lightning. Well, he's a grown man. And basically, Wakanda's been able to isolate one of their many planets that the aliens were on. And they were seeking a way to, well, one, identify the problem, and two, find a way to deal with it. Eventually, things all went to shit, as it often do. And I think everything happened so quickly within this final book that none of the ideas that were set up had any time to actually breathe and see it played out in a sufficient manner. So everything just felt like lightning. It's like 1 second we're here and the next second we're somewhere else. I'm not gonna get too much into the details for spoilers and stuff like that, but the conflict escalated super quickly. I know Hickman did an okay job with filling in the backstory, so we know how it is that we got there. There are systems that were in place, established by the Wakandans, that unfortunately, those things that made their life and their expansion easy also facilitated the breakout for the aliens and so on, which of course is an inevitable thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We had a fight, there's losses, and that's pretty much it. Now, here's the thing, right? This is my real take here. We all know, well, okay, for me personally, I didn't expect much with Aliens. As a matter of fact, Aliens, I don't read their books when they get published. Aliens, Predator, I don't care. Yeah, I watched the movies in them. Some of them I'm familiar, just like you guys grew up on that stuff. Aliens, Predator, I'm aware of crossovers throughout the decades. I have seen some interesting stuff. I read Predator versus Batman way back in the day. Yeah, I only picked this up because it was Hickman. And I was like, okay, this is my boy. Let's see what sort of big brain stuff he's going to do with aliens. With the first book, it's again a very Hickman thing. Half the time you don't know what's going on. You're getting a bunch of setups, a bunch of random concepts and ideas, and it's just seeding, big idea kind of stuff, right? And so I was looking at that. I was like, okay, we're probably here for about 8 issues, maybe 10 issues. For the amount of seeding that he's doing, it's going to need that kind of breadth, right? Aliens to me are like a throwaway thing in Marvel. There's no way. We've seen the Brood has shown us that aliens can't live in Marvel universe. There's nowhere for them. Anywhere they go, they will not be successful. It would take conscious, not even luck, the conscientious machinations of some sort of cosmic entity as a guardian to facilitate they having any form of success within the Marvel universe. There's too many things that can neutralize them and put them in place. Again, I point at the Brood. The Brood has not been truly successful and has not been relevant in decades, right? Until Hickman came along, and during the Krakoa stuff, he made a reference to the Brood and stuff like that. But they haven't been relevant in decades. So the mere fact that he took this weak throwaway concept idea and he made them seem badass. He put them against like some real heavy hitters. He put the aliens against Hulk, against Thor, against Captain Marvel. And he showed you how it is that they were able to dominate and take over, what it is that they exploited. Yeah, it is kind of hand wavy at certain points, and you kind of have to turn a blind eye and say, like, okay, to make it work. But you went along with it because it's aliens. You know, this felt like a corporate kind of stuff. You know, it's like licensing shit. So just run with it. But I was falling into the story. So by the time we got to book 4 and I realized like this is the end and I saw how it wrapped up, I was severely disappointed because there's so many things that were seeded, as I said, that needed room to expand. We had the situation with the Wakandans. Yeah. We had the situation on Mars. We had the situation with the life ship. We had this Spider-Man in a white suit with a venom that came in contact with a face hugger. That whole, I wanted to see what became of that. That's interesting. What happens when a symbiote, you know, interacts with a face hugger? And it still had a symbiotic relationship with the Spider-Man that it was on. That was an interesting concept. Nada, nothing explored. Okay. Then we had an alien that Sinister propagated. The Queen had Colossus skin and Nightcrawler's teleportation. It's like, how do you even beat that? It's chock full of mutant DNA. How do you even beat that? And then we had the Wakandans with all their resources and so on, and powers and technology and all that kind of stuff. And again, like the Wakandans, especially the Intergalactic Empire, they have a tremendous amount of resources and they have mutants on their side as well. Like so much more could have come out of that. Instead, this thing ended oh, and I don't even know if I can say this, but it was rather unfortunate. I expected more. 4 books was not enough. There were too many interesting ideas and concepts that I felt would have been enjoyable if given more time. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. It was it's a bit of a disappointment.
All right, well, let me jump before Mark goes this round. Let me get my. I'm not gonna be long. You can have the floor after. Yeah, very much that you can. My main point was like it felt to me like somebody told him, "Man, yeah, you got something else to do, so wrap this up quick." The last issue felt very rushed. A lot of these stuff the first 2 issues felt very much like he was planning something big. It was going to be a 10-issue run or 8 issues or something. And then this all rushed ahead in the last issue. I really didn't care for it. I wasn't invested at the end. The aliens just felt, I don't know, they don't normally have a personality, but they felt even less much like a presence this time. They all centered mostly around Sinister, and I was very underwhelmed by how it wrapped up. Let me also mention the sad Rubik's art I usually love. For some reason, I didn't like it in this one at all. And then he gave Wolverine that stupid beard sticking out the mask. I don't know what that was about. That was so off-putting, and it annoyed me the entire time. But yeah, this felt like a lot of setup, and it felt like a wasted opportunity. Thought it was going somewhere, and it just fizzled out at the end. Yeah, that's it for me. Yeah, give it to us straight.
So Hickman did like, all the setup, and it felt like he was doing something, like Glenn said, bigger. This book reminds me of Marvel Zombies, a shit show. It reminds me of
Hey.
I said what I said
Marvel was fire.
what I said. It reminds me of DC Deceased, another shit show.
What?
It reminds me of garbage. It reminds me of
was good.
DC versus vampires, another
Fair,
shit,
Yes, I agree there.
right? And here's what
Mark, you
connects
can't put
all.
DCs on the same level, Marvel vampires on the
Yes,
same level of DCs.
I can. Yes, I can. Here's why. Here's why. Stick with me here. You have heroes with established characters, established personalities, established power sets that are ignored or twisted just for the sake to push along a shit concept. That's what all of these stories have in common. You have, and the thing is, it's not the setup that Hickman didn't deliver on that bothers me. It is the perversion of characters and their powers and their abilities. You have Hulk, who Banner by this point is like an old man, but Hulk is still Hulk. And in like the first issue or two, it showed that these fucking aliens cannot handle the Hulk. And you know what happens? The Hulk gets stuck on Earth because Banner decides he wants to have a last stand and to get him over the way narratively. So he's stuck on Earth while the rest of the survivors leave on their rocket ship. Hulk, like you said, Glenn, aliens should not get any traction in Marvel. I blame it on Hickman. But anyway, like they're like and what makes me almost unable to speak is Hickman keeps referencing stuff that should dispatch calmly these friggin' aliens. Like the same symbiotes. There's a symbiote in the story that literally eats friggin' aliens. And there's a whole planet of them. Like how many symbiotes are in Marvel like right now? Right? You telling me that nobody was able, like the Fantastic Four, the only mention was Valeria, and she was already infected and she dead like a punk. Too many characters in Avengers versus Aliens went out like weak bitches, weak, simply to advance this rubbish narrative that Hickman couldn't even be bothered to properly pay off. That's it. I already spent too much of my time and energy ranting on this book, ranting on this series, ranting on how disappointed it is. I don't want to like channel that energy right now, but disappointment is an understatement.
I think the problem was Marvel putting Hickman on this book. We probably give it too high expectations. I think the whole premise behind this book was, I would say, a licensing tie-in. Marvel's been doing the Godzilla books tied in with their characters, and this was just another one of those tying in the aliens to one of their characters. And I guess we saw Hickman's name and said, "Whoa, this would be some big cosmic frontline, property." Yeah. And we've been waiting and we've been anticipating, and this is what we get.
And in 4 issues, like explosive vanilla curry diarrhea.
Look. The expectations for this book, right, to be fair, shouldn't have really been super, super high. The fact that Hickman was on there, to me, the draw was with his imagination, we would see something interesting with the aliens. The fact of the matter, Mark, is that, as I said earlier, the aliens, they can't exist within the Marvel universe as no form of Batman. They cannot. There's too many things existing there to neutralize them. They are not a threat. So this man had the challenge of making them be a threat, and a credible one, which requires us to suspend our disbelief even further than what comics already requires of her. Of course he failed. It's only 4 issues. What the hell somebody like Hickman is going to do within 4 issues like that? Well, not that he couldn't pull it off. It felt to me the way it played off, it got wrapped up. Like, what is the reason for that 6 months wait between book 3 and book 4? What is it that was happening?
It wasn't even wrapped up definitively or satisfactorily or nothing. It was left on a cliffhanger, as if
There's no cliffhanger. There was no cliffhanger. They won.
Did they win?
Way to neutralize the aliens. Right?
What? Sorry.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. It happened literally within like 1 or 2 panels. That's why. And it involved the
I guess I missed those panels in my frustration, maybe.
Yeah, the black symbiote versus the Sinister symbiote.
I'm pretty sure that book ended with the survivors on a ship outside of a black hole.
Yes. So
Okay.
they found the way to neutralize them. They ran the aliens in them away after they neutralized them. And then they put on Tony Stark helmet. And then Tony Stark came with the epilogue, charging them to go forth boldly where no man has ever gone before, essentially. Jump between the multiverses and carry on the legacy of neutralizing these things throughout the multiverse. That is what they've been charged with. It wasn't no cliffhanger. That was a definitive end. But it's
Weak
not a very
garbage.
satisfying end.
Absolutely.
Everything just happened within like 3 pages. That's ridiculous.
At this point, I'm wondering what Mike would have said about these books. But anyhow,
So we're gonna move on to my book. I am pretty sure you guys did not read this, but I'm gonna try my hardest to sell you on it.
I read it and
Oh, you did?
It's
Yeah,
on my to-read list.
I read
It's
it
on my
and
to-read list.
Okay.
I
Cool.
don't know what I read.
Okay, well, let me see if I can break it down for you and why I liked it. I'm gonna talk about Images, Exquisite Corpses by James Tynion and Michael Walsh on art. Issue 2 came out this week, but I'm gonna try to recap both issues pretty quickly. Otherwise, this review is not gonna make any sense. So this is a story about the 13 richest families in America who secretly rule the country. The politicians, the elections, the lawmakers, all that's just a facade, a pantomime to fool the 99% into thinking they're actually free, actually living in a democracy, and have any control over their lives. So, every 5 years, these colossal assholes get together and they cordon off some small town corner of the country, trapping all the residents, and basically they enact a battle royale to the death. These uber cunts, obviously, they don't do their dirty work. So each family enlists a proxy to kill on their behalf. There are rules to this game. The main one being that they all have to randomly pick, like out of a box or something, a card which indicates what weapon their killer is allowed to use. So one guy, he would get to use hammers, one guy gets to use swords, another guy gets to use poison, etc. We get introductions to all 13 of the families as they meet up for the live viewing, and we get introductions to their killers in these like cool half pinup style panels with like stylized logos and everything. You know, like how he was on the cover like Superman across the banner and stuff like that. So, there's one called Recluse, whose weapon is a rope. There's another called Leopold Strong, who uses a giant hammer. There's even this psychopath serial killer in a bunny mascot suit called Rascal Randy. His weapon is hands, so you choke yo or whatever. Running through the book, we see the matriarch of one of these families go to this little cabin in the woods with his entourage of mercenaries for protection, where she finds this guy who lives there, this huge, giant, scary Frank Castle-looking motherfucker, who we learn is basically like, and I'm doing quotes, one of our protagonists. He's this ex-soldier Black Ops type who was dishonorably discharged, basically lost his life and his purpose. The old lady promises she can make it all go away and give him back everything he lost. So eventually he agrees and he becomes her proxy, and he gets introduced to us again in a cool half splash page logo and all as the lone gunman. The weapon obviously being a gun, or the gun. We also get to meet other characters, the townspeople. There's a mother who works for this asshole mirror, her young son. Here's where I had kind of forgotten that it was Tynion writing this book, but then we get introduced to her gay neighbor, and we say, oh yeah, Tynion, right? Her gay neighbor, and his boyfriend. There are a couple of EMTs and also the sheriff who's aware of all this and is paid off by the rich people to look the other way and leave the town forever. So he gets in his car, he drives away. He leaves a note for one of the EMT. It's his niece, I think it was, telling her that she really should get in her ambulance and drive out of town. He doesn't tell her what happens, but he tells her she needs to leave. She doesn't, being an EMT and having responsibilities and whatnot. The game begins, and we lose a couple of players pretty early on as they move further into town. I won't say who we lose, but the first kill was especially gnarly. We see the killers interact with some of the townsfolk, and some encounters having much better outcomes than others. For me, there was a lot of character diversity here as your rich douchebags interact among each other. They all hate each other. It's all a game for them. The side bets, they have side bets on like who gets the most kills. The grand prize, which is, like I said, these 13 families rule America, but the grand prize is that this family rules everybody. This is the King family then, basically. But it seems pretty meaningless because they don't seem to really care about who's running the show. They're more interested in bragging rights, in my opinion. I also found the premise of doing it in an inhabited town kind of weird, because these people could easily afford to let these killers loose on a deserted island. But I don't know how rich people brains work, so I guess this is all part of the fun. They're not out to kill civilians. Civilians may die as collateral damage, but their goal is to kill one another and be the last killer standing. That family wins. There was actually like a real sense of excitement and anticipation during the setup for me. And once it gets going, I actually found myself rooting for a couple of the guys while despising some of the others, the more depraved ones. Like I said, the lone gunman is our apparent quote unquote, but I suspect Tynion is going to subvert our expectations and kill him at some point. Walsh's art, Michael Walsh's art, is what I expect and appreciate for this type of story. It's not flashy, it's gritty and real enough to immerse you in the story's dark premise while still being fun to look at. So, the more I think about this book, the more I talk about it, the more I like it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all pans out. It was a fun read, an interesting concept. It feels more like Tynion is writing for a movie pitch or a series pitch, a Netflix series. It feels very TV or movie-like, but it's fun. And yeah, I'm in for the entire run. What do you think, Gibson?
I appreciate your perspective because I just read the first issue and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I couldn't get my head around it. Maybe it's because I'm tired or just slow. Who knows?
Maybe both.
Maybe both, But your take made it sound both more interesting and less my cup of tea because it reminds me of the Purge, and I like the premise of the Purge. I never got into the Purge, so I'm aware of it from pop culture. But the concept of it didn't really appeal to me. Where I am right now in terms of these type of stories I'm looking for, the grimdark. And yeah, you have to do something like really fascinating or compelling to catch my attention with these kind of grim dark slasher murder kill type stories. This isn't going to be a choice for me. I look in it for the show. I don't have any skin in this game.
Fair enough. I'm a horror fan, so I like slasher movies, I like slasher books, and my tastes are pretty diverse, so this is one I enjoy too. But it's fine.
Yeah, I'm not a horror fan. Like,
yeah, I know you aren't.
That one I put you.
Then you said you have it to read, or you say you read it?
No, I have it on my to-read list, but I haven't gotten around to it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I hope that my review piqued your interest a little bit more. Maybe we get to it. Yeah. Okay, sounds good. All right, so that's it for our reviews break. All right, so now we are gonna move on to our topic of the night, topic of the week, and we're gonna be talking tonight about comic fans. Us, you. Are we our own worst enemy? For me, I think we can be harmful to the industry or to the fandom. First and foremost, one of the main things I was thinking of, and I am extremely guilty of this. I am probably chief offender. Is gatekeeping.
I'm out thing.
Gatekeeping. That's me. Who gets to be a real fan? I dismiss everybody as a casual, and that's not welcoming. This is not going to grow the fandom. This is not going to encourage new people to read. Being invested in this lifestyle, this hobby, this genre, this has been part of my life for over 30 years. So I take it really passionately, and I'm very defensive when it comes to it, protective, and I can be an asshole when it comes to it. But yeah, it is what it is. I have to make a conscious effort to be a better person, to be a better fan, and encourage the casuals and the noobs into getting into it so they too can grow and get to love it the way I do. So
Who are
that's my
you?
hello. I may be a douchebag, but I'm very self-aware douchebag. I know who I am. I know my faults, so I can admit I know that's me. Okay. There's also yeah. There's also things like another one. Creator harassment. You ever see these guys on Twitter and stuff cussing Bendis? And there's a group that Glenn and I both go on Facebook, and these guys would be talking about, I hate this book by John Romita Jr. I hate to see his stuff. Bendis, right? This is gonna be trash. It's like you trying to pull down everything and everybody who creates the stuff you love. So, I mean, yes, but we go hold these guys to a higher standard. Is this really what you want to do? Is this how you're gonna make things get better?
Yeah. So all right. I gave this a lot of thought, and I think that it is true, and it's also complicated. That's the short answer. Like you said, we are comic book fans. A lot of us have been fans for decades, like huge chunks of our lives, like easily, I don't know, half of our lives, or maybe even three-quarter of our lives, depending on how old we are. We've been fans of these characters, and like you said, like you admitted, that can make us gatekeepers, in the worst possible way. For me, I I try not to be a gatekeeper, as in trying to stop new fans from coming into the comics, because I clearly remember that when I was getting the comics, there were people who were welcoming to me, who would tell me stuff is like, "Oh, you like reading Superman? Check out this book or this character." And I think that comics as a medium needs more of that. I think there's enough space in comics, especially now that it reached this mainstream appeal. There's room, I think, for diverse interests, diverse tastes. And part of that is kind of built into comics for me. So every so often, a character would get a restart or a refresh or a new direction, or you might see a different um take on the character. Green Lantern is a perfect example of this. I think I would have mentioned this before. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you would have heard me say this. For some people, John Stewart is the only Green Lantern they know, because they would have grown up watching Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, the anime shows. Um, the people who their on ramp into comics is actually from a comic adjacent perspective, so like anime shows or movies, and then ideally they then go looking for more of a particular character or story in the comic as well, kind of bringing people in. I think that's good. I think that's necessary, but comic fans can definitely be gatekeepers. There's definitely a gatekeeping aspect to comics. I don't know if it's a mask for insecurity. I don't know if it's like pushing back from when comics were a lot more niche, and comic book fans were seen as, geeks or weirdos or whatever. I don't know if it's a factor of social media or internet now, where, there's a lot of online forums and comments sections, which all can seem very, very toxic. But every comic book fan who is a passionate person for the medium started out as a newbie. They had to get into comics somewhere. And for comics to really thrive, you need to keep bringing people into comics. You need to keep focusing on the fact that comics bring us together. And as comic fans, we often don't do that. Another point to add to what Wade was saying is that comic book fans can often be saboteurs, particularly for anything that they feel is new. So things like diversity of tone, of structure, new characters taking up old roles, or old characters taking up new roles, whatever you wanna twist it. I actually had to think about this topic in the context of my comments on Superman Unlimited #2, to see if it was being contradictory or, hypocritical. It happens, and I'll mention that a bit later. But yeah, comic don't we don't react to new stuff. Right now, I actually saw, I think, in the WhatsApp group, Wade, was it Wade that posted this, that it actually is a concerted effort from a very small group of Snyder fans to derail the new Superman movie, which is going to drop in like a few weeks. And it seems like they put some thought into trying to derail it, like doing things like pre-ordering tickets but not actually paying for them, or some nonsense, and a bunch of other stuff. And I get it. You might be fans of Zack Snyder and Man of Steel and stuff. There were things that Zack Snyder did that I like and they want to see develop more, and we're not going to get a chance to do that. But I don't think that automatically should lead to shitting on the new James Gunn movie. I don't. I'm actually very excited to see the new Superman movie. I like what James Gunn has done over his last 4 entries in the superhero space. So I'm kind of excited to see what he's going to do. But I don't think that automatically invalidates the Zack Snyder DCEU. You know, comics are literally built on different takes on the same characters over a long period. Some of them land, some of them don't. Some of them might not land initially, but if you give the person time to cook, like I'm trying to do with Dan Slott, you actually get a pretty cool story out of it. So I think we raging against newness and change is not a great thing for comics. Another point for me, comics aren't being written for long form storytelling anymore. One of the strengths and weaknesses of comics is, especially the big two stuff, the DC and the Marvel, is their continuity, the long form approach to it, where the storytelling is additive. Every new writer, every new creative team comes on and they do something that helps build this wider tapestry of stories and storytelling. You're not getting that anymore. It feels like every new writer or every new restart or reboot is a writer saying, "Hey, this is my own thing. This is my own take on this character," and it doesn't really carry on anymore. The whole reverting to a new number one every, I don't know, 20 issues kind of plays into it. So yeah, we're at the era right now where it feels like the panels are being created just to become memes or screenshots. Things only really matter if it becomes trending. Rage baiting fans has become the habit with Spider-Man. Seems to be more the thing rather than the exception. So yeah, fans, we as fans, we reward it. We rant online, we rant on podcasts like this. We rage share and rage tweet, and outrage becomes the metric for engagement, and that's a great thing. So, like I said, even with like Dan Slott, I don't think that he might be the guilty one. I think this is just perhaps a symptom of comics becoming a chase, become chasing spectacle rather than trying to tell stories, even as absurd as they can be, that have substance. As fans, we on the one part are complaining about gimmicks, but then we're gonna turn them into hashtags. We rage read, we read bait. We, try to keep out new readers, new fans. We take a dump on other flavors of comics like manga, manhwa, web comics, because it might not be what we see our definition.
Hey,
No way. That is an attack.
hey,
I'm not coming at you.
hey, yeah, I that's me. I have no problem admitting that.
But
It's
it's all comics, man. So yes, in short, we can definitely be our own worst enemy as comic fans. I don't think it has to be that case, and I'm hoping that, or at least for my part, I'm trying to be the kind of comic fan that help bring me into comics.
So are we our own worst enemy? When you say it like that, when I hear this topic, I think of it as are we tripping up ourselves? Are we getting in our own way? Are we taking actions that are generally making things worse for us? And when you look at the entire community, it's very easy to say, yes, we are our own worst enemies because we're also including the extremes within that. Okay. I would beg to differ. I don't think we are our worst enemies. Mark brought up the point that there's a lot of rage reading and rage sharing and, you know, a lot of philosophizing and stuff like that on podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, those things happen. But the outcome of that, I don't think is worse books. I think the outcome of that is better books. If you're having people that are raging against the content, there's something wrong about the content, especially when you start breaking it down and you're looking at who it is that is raging and what are their reasons for raging. Then you would more often than not see that they have a valid point. If you've been reading comics for more than a decade, let's say you're 15, 20 years into reading comics, you would have read enough that you have gained knowledge of various writing styles and quality. What makes a good book? What doesn't? You would have seen or taken the time, hopefully, to read the pinnacle of the medium, and you would have also seen some of the worst. And by having that experience, you kind of know what you're talking about. We want good books and we want to be entertained. Sometimes those two things are, well, they're not mutually exclusive. So we can get entertaining books that are not good at all, and we can get some very good books that are not entertaining. I don't think that we, the fans, are driving people away, at least not in a broad sense. I think that by and large, our community tends to be very welcoming. And I think that we've been pretty much, by and large, been getting good books overall. We're not always pleased with what it is that we get, but by and large, we can say, hey, that wasn't too bad. It was an okay book, or it was a decent book, that sort of stuff. I don't see anything that we're doing as harming the industry, as harming the sort of books that we're getting. That's not on us. That's more on the companies that make the decision to put the books in them out. Because by and large, we realize that they don't listen to us anyway. If they did, then there would be a whole lot less complaining going on than what it is that we're having. So we're not our own enemies. I don't think we're tripping up ourselves. I don't think we're harming ourselves. And gatekeeping is necessary because we love our hobby. We love the books in them that we read. We love the art form. And the point of gatekeeping is that you are protecting that art form. When persons take up anything of interest, you pick it up because something caught your eye. You stick with it because something about it resonated with you. And if you really love it, then you go backwards and then you start researching and looking into and experiencing the things that made what it is that you fell in love with what it is. You get to appreciate its history, which now makes whatever you're consuming now, you get to enjoy it more. But then another thing happens as well. If when you go back and you learn the history, and you get to understand what makes this particular thing great. And now you compare it to what it is that you're being offered now, and what you're being offered does not resemble anything that makes it great or defines it. If what you're getting is a lower grade, then you are going to complain, and that's only fair. Now, we know realistically everything that's produced within our area of interest will never be like the Titans. Those are a rare breed in every medium. If it's gaming, if it's music or whatever, the top ones, the Mount Rushmores, they're a rare breed. But they set a standard to aspire to. And if the people who are involved in producing these works do not aspire to that level, in some way, shape, or form, to the best of their abilities, then we have a problem. So no, I don't think that we are our worst enemies. There are things that we can work on, the way in which we talk to each other, like, again, the extremes. And even if we're not extreme, there are things that we can do actually to encourage, well, to grow our our community. And we grow our community in the sharing. But more so, what grows the community is awareness. I don't know how much awareness and quote unquote marketing is being done for our interests, for comics per se, right? Because the comics sell themselves. Like I'm a bookseller. And one of the things that I love about selling books is that I don't have to sell the books. The books sells themselves, right? As long as they're there and people can see them, they see what they want, they read the synopsis, the book sells itself. And I think comics do the same thing. Comics sell themselves, but comics need an opportunity to sell themselves. It's like Purge always says, right? Comics need to be in places where eyes can fall on them. If they're out there where the general public can see them and interact with them, then the odds of growing the community increases significantly. But the average person has no real reason to go into a comic book store. They don't have no real reason to go to a comic book store. But they go to a supermarket, they may go to a library, they may go to, a pharmacy. And if your books are there, then they see it and they engage with it. So yeah, that's just my take on that.
Feel
Some
I
counterpoints too. I'm just trying to speak from both sides of the fence, really. It's passion. It's not more. It's not like just want to be a douchebag about it. We care about this stuff. That's why we behave the way we do. It's only a small minority of fans online that are toxic, in my opinion. The rest of us are here for the long haul. We have issues when things aren't good. And I guess we speak to that with our dollars. We would not buy a run, but we don't go online and want to turn and feather somebody or want to string them up.
So what I'm hearing, Wade, is that you're okay with us adding a versus segment to the show. Loving your enthusiasm. I do think I do agree that is a very small percentage of truly toxic fans. The Even when there isn't, let me say, active toxicity or active gatekeeping, there's still this perception. I like diving into like the business side of comics, the industry, and COVID was good for comics. One, because everyone was locked down and things to do, but it kind of really propelled digital access to comics to the forefront. So one of the data points that stuck in my head is that there was a really sharp increase. I think something like during COVID, something like 47% of new readers were female.
Just those numbers, Corporal.
Wow, wow, wow. Anyway, but that's a significant thing because comic book shops, the comic book medium has always been male dominated. I've spoken to a few female comic fans, and they've consistently said that they were always intimidated to get into comics because they saw it as such a male dominated space, intimidated to walk into a comic book shop, even if they had a genuine interest beyond, let's say, entry level stuff like Archie's and so on. And part of it too, like Glenn was saying, books, comics particularly, tend to market themselves. You don't really see ads for comics outside of comics, the comic book space. I feel like that's a missed opportunity, but that's a whole other thing. But it's like, we can definitely do more to get more people into it. And into it, I would give credit to the MCU in kind of taking comics mainstream. But then it's a case where there isn't as much redirection of interest beyond the movies. Yeah.
Here's the thing, right? You say that we need to do more to grow the community. What more can we actually do as a fandom to grow the community? That is not our burden. We share the things that we like naturally through the osmosis of socialization. That's how these things happen. And people stick if they enjoy what it is that you introduce them. Okay? So, for example, right now, there's a brother man in one of our chats. Okay? For the past year, he's been intermittently reading comics. I gave him a few things, introduced him to a few things, tried to be as general as possible, and I tried to find things that more or less suit his interest based on what it is that he was reading when he was reading manga and stuff like that. Okay. So I noticed that he tends to like more street level heroes and so on. So I showed him and he latched on to Deathstroke. After Deathstroke, he got into Spawn, and then after Spawn, he got into Batman. He was just reading Batman random, right? He didn't ask me anything. He just went and he found if there was a cover that looked cool to him, he picked it up, he read it. He's been enjoying himself. But recently he decided to jump back into comics after a few months hiatus, and he was looking for some Batman stuff to read. And without any consultation, he picked up Tom King's Batman. Now, knowing what he likes, I didn't think that Tom King's Batman would really appeal to him. And so I put him on to Snyder's Batman from New 52. And you know what? He's enjoying the living out of that Batman run. He can't stop talking. Whereas when he was reading the Tom King stuff, his one and only comment was he needs to get past this Gotham Girl thing. There's that, again, people have what it is that they like, but the books, the product itself has to be worthy of the person that's reading them. And that is not on us as the fandom, right? And even when it comes to the Mount Rushmore of comics, some of those things, some of those books, most of those books are not appealing to like a wider audience. They might find it boring. I can't go to this guy and put Watchman in his hand or give him Sandman. He'd be bored out of his mind. He ain't care about that. He don't care if it's the most Shakespearean and well written epistle to ever been epistled. That it's highly rated by everybody that knows their salt, the most elite amongst us and all that kind of thing. He could give a flying shit. It does not appeal to him. And I say this as well, that even if there are persons among us who's going around being negative and just chatting shit, if you're enjoying comics and whatever genre of comics you enjoy, those people are not going to stop you from enjoying comics. And that's why I double down by saying we are not our worst enemies. I don't see us running people away from comics. And the people and them who do not get into comics, it's simply because it's just not for them. There's nothing we can do about that. I don't think there's any comic that we could show them that would make them adopt comics. They might enjoy that specific book, but I don't really see them adopting comics per se, right? And I've even went so far as to start cultivating a list of books that I think would be interesting books for people. And then whenever I encounter somebody within the community, a brief conversation with them, and I get to read them, I make some suggestions from that list. One of my top recommendations is Luther Strode, and I tend to give that as a recommendation from anybody that is coming off of manga, because the stories, Luther Strode is perfect for me as an example, and I'm not going to make this too long, but Luther Strode is perfect as an example for a book, a comic book to hook people, especially those coming from manga, like shonen manga, battle manga, and stuff like that. Because one, the story is short, it gets straight to the point. Two, it has a very kinetic art style. Tradmore is just, I'd have to tell you guys about Tradmore. Y'all know this guy. He's absolutely amazing when it comes to displaying unique perspectives of movement and body and just, everything. It's just visually great. And it is absurd. The book is absurd, right? And the story is just really good. The pacing, everything is really good. So if they're coming off of a manga and they're not really willing to commit into a comic, but they need something that would scratch the itch, that is usually one of my suggestions, right? Before getting into anything else. I'm not going to give them new X-Men or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't give them no X-Men book to read. No. Might probably give them Punisher, depending, right? But again, it's an individual thing. But all this to say, through natural osmosis of socialization, we spread the gospel of comics. But the onus of creating a fan base and growing that fan base doesn't rest squarely on our shoulders. It rests on the corporations, those companies, the publishers, the ones who are the custodians of these things. And it is on them to do their job and produce things that are worth reading, that are enjoyable, that are interesting, that are well produced visually and narratively. That is on them. That's not a us problem.
Yeah, well, I know that I am a real snob and gatekeeper because 98% of what you just said pissed me off. All that stuff about not giving fans Watchmen and giving them Luther Strode and that I like, teach them to be better. Give them the Shakespeare. But yeah, I get what you're saying. But yeah, my brain isn't like that.
You are the problem, Wade.
They have to work up to them things there, Wade, because I'm not sorry to cut you off there, but I was doing that in the past. I'm like, man, you need to read Sandman and you need to read Lucifer, and you need to go and read East of West and shit like that. And all I heard was silence, But then when I feed them the Luther Strode, or I give them another one that newly made my list, Batman, One Bad Day, Riddler. When I give them that shit to read, that is like crack cocaine. They're stuck.
I get it. I totally get it. I just don't like it. That's all. Eating junk food for me, but I understand you got to transition them in, get them with the gateway drug, and then bring them with the higher stuff. That's fine. I just don't like it.
Fair enough.
So I guess we can wrap up now. Give something you want to do with the housekeeping, please.
Sure.
Wait. One honorable mention.
That's the one with the parents trying to find the kid or something, or
Yeah, in her dreams.
yeah, I haven't
That's
read
good.
that, but I know about it. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, man. Well, I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I plan on checking it out.
All right. Another cool recommendation. So, folks, once again, we've reached about the end of our show. Thank you so very much for being here with us as we discuss our picks of the week and our discussion. Feel free to share your thoughts. This podcast is available on a couple of platforms, the main ones being YouTube, the Alluhwa Comics at Alluhwa Comics, ALLUHWA Comics, COMICS. That is on YouTube. You can find it there. You can also find it on Spotify, the Four Outsiders Comics podcast on Spotify. It's on Amazon Music as well. You can check it out there. New episodes on Mondays, usually Monday evenings. You can check out the new episodes. So feel free to let us know in the comments, either on YouTube or on Spotify. What do you think? Do you you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have something completely out of left field? Let us know in those comments. We're going to be covering another Alluhwa comic title next week, so definitely tune in for that. If you want to support this show, if you like what you hear and you want to keep hearing more cool stuff like that, of course, be sure to share this show with your friends, with people you think will be interested. You can also support this show by checking out our online store. That's shop.alluhwacomics.com. We have a set of very cool creator-owned Caribbean comics there as well. You would have heard us talk about some of them on the show, like Terror of the Midnight Rubber or Same Squad. Definitely you can check those out there. Picking up those comics, supporting the show, supports not just what we do here, but those creators as well. So for this episode 7 of the Four Outsiders Comics Podcast, I'm Mark.
Yeah, we're gonna have Mike back next week for for everybody else because they're also Hulk fans. So there is some Hulk and some Godzilla talk and some Wolverine. Yeah, but I am Wade.
I am Rasta Surfer.